Hey guys, this is Daniel, Dr. D again, and today's review is going to be about the Klipsch Forte I. Not the 2, not the 3, not the 4, because there's plenty of videos on the 3 and 4, but there's absolutely nothing on the 1, and even the 2 for that matter, which is very unfortunate. Just seems like all the newer speakers came along around the same time YouTube did, and people seem to have left these in the past and gotten sucked up by all the new stuff. So, fortunately, I'm not one of those people. So, a lot of the stuff I'm trying to review is esoteric, unusual, and things you just don't find on YouTube. And so, I want to cover that stuff. And this Klipsch Forte I is custom made by a company, father and son business called Klipsch Restorations in Texas. And they have a nice website. Just go to Google and Google Klipsch Restorations. They have a wonderful website. And they'll show you all their beautiful heritage line of veneers and photos of all their woodwork. It's really world class. This one here is African Paduk, and it's a very unusual wood. I think back in the day, Klipsch, maybe it was the 90s, I don't remember exactly, but they used to offer wood veneers for these speakers, and they stopped doing it because of some of the laws regarding the trees and stuff. So that was understandable. So they had to stop doing all the veneer options, and I think they just ended up with just the oak and the walnut and black finishes. But this one has a newer base on it. If you look at the floor base stand on it, I had this kind of modern look on it. And they put the logo on there if you want. So I had that option. It also has Kreitz, brand new Kreitz crossovers. And the driver's already broken in and are mint condition like new. So it's like, for me, it was a no-brainer. I struggled in vain to try and find Forte ones. It's impossible to find any in really good shape. Most of them were just abused, or they had cut marks on the top, or who knows, you know. But I couldn't find anything local over the course of the past few years, so I just gave up and I said, heck with it. So for $27.50, I had these shipped, and that's what you're looking at. And I had listened to Cornwall's as well, but just no way a Cornwall is going to fit in these corners here. You know, it's just too much. And Forte doesn't take up much real estate. It's only about an inch wider than the Heresy, and it's an inch less deep. So it doesn't take up a lot of real estate. So it's really nice in that regard. I really wanted the Kreitz crossover because I just wanted a whole brand new network put in there, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. Because over time, those are the things that fail, and so I just wanted a fresh new start with it. So but you're probably wondering why go with the Forte one, where there was a 2 for even less money on eBay that they were offering. I don't know if it's sold yet, but nevertheless, I wanted the 1 specifically because of the mid-range horn, which is identically the same one used on the Heresy, which I think is the K53. I'll double check it, I think it is. But it's the same mid-range tweeter and the same mid-range horn. And on the more modern designs, you'll notice that they extend this horn. It just gets bigger, and it looks nice and everything, but I have issues with those horns, and I'll tell you an experience I had. So it's going to be a pretty lengthy review, so you'll probably want to sit down. But one of my concerns was the coherency of horns. Now, I listen to jazz, so I have some of my CDs here. You'll see like Gene Harris and Boss Tenor, Gene Ammons, and these horn instruments there's like a distinctive sound they have when you hear them in speakers. And what happens with coherency, and what I mean by that is, like, I'll just give you an example. I went to go listen to the new Forte 3, and I went to Upscale Audio, and I went into the showroom. I'll just tell you about this. Let me sit down for a moment here. And what happened, there was a gentleman looking at the Forte 3 and the Tannoy XT8. So they had them both set up. And I think they were driving both speakers with the Evo, I think it was one of the 400 integrated amps. And, you know, understand that these speakers are broken in. Those threes were broken in. The amp was well broken in because they use them, you know, for demos, all day long for weeks on end. And I didn't. I was just sitting in. The guy that was actually buying the speakers was the one that was doing the listening session. So I sat next to him, and he said, "Hey, feel free to sit down if you want to take a listen." So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to the two speakers, and after listening to several genres of music, I had made up my mind which speaker I thought was better. And I didn't tell him because I didn't want to influence his decision. And he looks at me, he says, well, looks like I'm going to be buying the Tannoy XT8. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I 100% agree. And that Tannoy XT8 just, man, I don't know, it just had a sweeter, smoother, more coherent sound no matter what we played. And I couldn't believe it. But the only thing is the Tannoy XT8 is, I think it's like, it's very affordable. I think it was less money than the Forte IIIs were. But it's not as sensitive. I think it's like 10 dB less sensitive. You'd have to check the stats. I don't know exactly, but I know it's less. And I like using small single-ended amps when possible, because I love the sweetness of their sound when you listen to horns and jazz instruments and stuff. And it's just, not going to be well enough to drive those Tannoys. So I was interested in the threes, and that was why I went to listen to that demo. And I was so heartbroken, just shattered, because I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to like this. The three, to me, didn't sound coherent. I'll get to a little bit more of that. But it just sounded so coarse and rough, and it sounded shrill, and the dispersal, and I'm not an engineer, obviously, and there's a lot involved with engineering, stuff that I don't understand. It's not my expertise. I just try to sit down and listen to this stuff, and I have a great deal of respect for engineers, and I think there's certain ways things have to be measured, and a lot of things that have to be understood, and I think a lot of people get lost in measurements. We're just, amateur. I'm an amateur. I'm not a professional at this stuff. So I just go based on what I think it is. One of the things I liked about my heresy is the coherency of horns and voices. They are so beautiful at that. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think what it is it has something to do with this mid-range driver and the tweeters. And what happens is that, what I think happens is, and Steve Huff has this video where he compares the Forte 4 with the Heresy 4, and ultimately what the heck is it, La Scala. Now, we all know videos are never going to portray exactly what we hear in the room. I understand that. But it does give you a sense of relativeness. Relativeness meaning the difference between what's audible between two things, or whatever you're comparing. And what I noticed in that video coincided precisely with what I was hearing at Upscale Audio. And what that is if you go and put your earbuds on or headsets and listen to those videos, and what you'll notice between the Heresy 4 that he demos and the Forte 4 is the voices just sound like they're in the background or tucked back or suppressed in the Forte 4. I couldn't stand it. I didn't like it. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it has something to do with the design of this mid-range horn that causes it. It's kind of like they're trying to cram as much in there as they can. I mean, I understand the new drivers, the horns look pretty and they look nice, and you look at them like, wow, you're going to get a big wide sound stage with them, and all these things go through your mind, right? But in my opinion, I think what's happening, at least from my experience listening to them, is that the instruments and the coherency are getting lost, are getting dispersed out too far. And these don't sound like horns. If I blind tested somebody, it doesn't have that shouty horn kind of sound people describe. I just don't. I bet my friends would fail miserably if I blind tested them, because they just don't have that effect. And so that was the reason I wanted the Forte ones. It is the only one that has this mid-range driver that looks like this horn that is shaped like this. And it does sound huge when you listen to it. It doesn't sound like it's constricted or anything. You know, when you look at them, you would think it just sounds like it's going to be more open and more airy with the other one. But I think there's just a compromise in the sound. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not an engineer. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just taking a stab at what may be the cause of it. And I knew that I had already liked my heresies a lot. I was just lacking some of the bass. We know that. So I was using my Rel T5Is and on some of the songs and stuff. And I wanted more flexibility with all my amps, you know, rather than just having to use the bass from the Allen Eaton 45s because they had good bass in them. And so anyway, the other thing that really attracted me to this is the phenolic tweeter. This utilizes a phenolic tweeter rather than titanium. And that really attracted me because I know materials have a smoother, sweeter, silkier kind of sound to them in general. And, you know, if you go to a forum and you ask people, oh, which tweeter should I get? They're always going to favor titanium. I don't know if people just love it because it was used on the SR-71 Blackbird. You know, they hear the word titanium and they go nuts. It's like, I don't fall into that camp. And I also don't fall into the camp where just a bunch of people agree on something. I'm going to agree with it. I want to know why. You know, I want to understand why, you know. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about this tweeter, and then I'll talk about some things. I'm going to get to the sound of it as well. And by the way, before I get into that, I want to tell you about an experience I had with Cornwall. A friend of mine has my Bob Latino ST70, and he invited me over to listen to it, and I went to hear it through his Cornwalls. And I just want to tell you about the Cornwall 1. I think it's like a 1.2. It's like one of the earlier versions. And when I first sat down, his room is just like mine. It's like wide, you know, set up, and the speakers are wide because I like it that way with the soundstage. I like that wide soundstage kind of effect. And he goes, I sat down and we listened to several genres of music. One of the things I loved about the Cornwall is it just has this robust, you know, it sounded like my heresies on steroids, you know, and the bass is very tight and palpable, and, you know, it just felt the impact of it. And it was nice. I wouldn't say it was finesseful. It didn't have like finesse when you're playing jazz necessarily, but compared to these, for example. But it really impressed me, and the scale of it and everything. It's just a huge speaker. I couldn't fit it in here. There's no way I was going to fit them in here. And the Fortes are kind of like a hi-fi jazz speaker, and they still have that heritage of sound, that liveliness. They also have kind of a hi-fi, a really refined kind of sound to them compared to the other heritage series, which I'll get to. But with regard to the tweeters, I want to just explain to you my thinking on here, because so many people are like, you go into a forum, they're like, oh, you got to get titanium. I'm like, I don't believe that, and I'll tell you why. If I were to just common sense, let's just take a bell, and I go like this, and I hit it with metal, right? Think of a titanium tweeter is made of metal. Hear the bell? A phenolic tweeter is going to be like this. It's going to sound dampened. And one of the biggest complaints that you had with the Heritage line, and I don't share this opinion, but a lot of people feel this way, that they're shouty and they're loud and, you know, they bark at you kind of, you know, thing. And I don't get that effect. But if you ask me, I think titanium would create that effect. It's going to have that tintier kind of sound compared to phenolic. Phenolic's going to sound smoother. So why would you want to put titanium tweeters inside of something and make it sound even more, you know, metallic-like? That's what you're trying to get away from, right? Now, I understand there's some tricks you can do with crossovers so that titanium can sound really good. But I encourage you to look at this video by Audioholics called Soft versus Hard Dome Tweeters. And what this, I really like this video because it's very level-headed, it's logical, it's common sense. They talk about how not to get tricked by titanium because it's so fancy sounding. You know, it's this fancy metal. Because my understanding is that it has to be done very well to make it sound right. Otherwise, you'll get very bad performance out of it. I'm not necessarily saying that's what happened to the heritage line. I like my heresies. I still love them. But I encourage you to take this in, so you're not just fooled by people who just say, titanium is the God, it's the Almighty. I don't share that. The other thing too, I almost want to go to some of the stats here. I'm just going to pull this up here, and I'm going to show you the. This is the stats on the Forte I that I have. You'll see it goes down to 32 hertz here. It's 98 dB sensitive. And the K53 is a mid-range. It's the same one used in the Heresy. And you see here's the stats on the Heresy. You'll see it drops down to 50 hertz. You'll see the mid-range, the K53 mid-horn in there. And the tweeters are what's different. Look at the tweeters. K76 tweeter, which is a titanium tweeter diaphragm that's used on my Heresy, and the K75 tweeter on my Forte is the Phenolic tweeter, and I love that tweeter. But look at the magnets. This is the difference between the magnets of the K76, which is used on my current, Heresy 2. And this is what the Forte I magnet looks like on the tweeter. Now, one of the things that happened, one of the differences is this has a little bit more shrill sound to it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they sound shrill. I'm just trying to give you kind of a perspective or use some words to kind of describe the difference. This sounds a little bit more brighter. It sounds brighter, compared to this. This sounds smoother and sweeter, this Phenolic tweeter. One of the things, and I don't know if the magnet has anything to do with it, but when you listen to horns, the extension that extends way out and all the decay at the end, it's incredible, man, when you compare the two. And I wanted to have that coherency, that I was getting from my Heresy, but get all the sweetness out of the highs and the tweeters, man. And these K75s with the Phenolic tweeters, man, I'm just like, oh my God. There's just no going back, And OCD Hi-Fi Guy did a comparison where he took the Phenolic tweeters out on his Forte 2s and replaced them with titanium. And I put my headsets on to listen to the video. I didn't hear any advantage of the titanium, so I don't know what he was talking about. Maybe he hears something in his room because he's actually there, but I just didn't get that effect. And I have no intentions of ever going to titanium again after hearing how sweet the Phenolic tweeters sound. And so the way they sound, I want to talk about that. I couldn't go to the 3s. I couldn't go to the 4s because I was concerned about that mid-range and those coherency of those voices. I was like, there's no way I'm getting those. And I didn't want to go to the Heresy 4s. I've already done the Heresy 4s. I've listened to them over and over. They have box resonance. They have this boxy resonant sound to them when you turn them up. This has been well verified by people that have reviewed them. And they also, in order to hear the bass on the Heresy 4s, you have to really pump them up to get the volume, up to get the bass drivers going. And that's why I had to implement subs with my Heresies, because I was playing them at low volume, say 60 dB at night. I had to use subs because you can't hear the bass. And you can't turn them up to get that bass going. You got to drive the crap out of them. And I don't want to do that. So the Forte ones have all the coherency that you get from the Heresy, but the bass extension and the highs are absolutely jaw-dropping. I had to tell you, when I first sat down and listened to these, I dropped my jaw. I could not believe how good they sound. And I don't know why people, if they express that. I don't hear much on the Forte one, but man, there is nothing that a Heresy 4 does that this doesn't do, and then some. This does everything the Heresy does and more. The top end is sweeter, it's smoother, you get the coherency with the mid-range, and the bass is just out of this world, man. It's like nothing I've ever heard. And I don't get this problem with it being with the wall. I'm probably about 2 feet from the wall, behind it, 1.5 feet, 2 feet. And the bass is just beautiful. It's tight, it's deep. I can play it at low volume and you feel it. And it's just like, you're listening to jazz, you get all the sweetness of the horns, the voices and everything, the way it comes at you. This is what's the ironic thing is. Of all the Fortes, the one has the most bass. And yet it uses a 12-inch passive radiator on the back. It's the only one. The rest, the Forte 2, 3, and 4 all use 15-inch passive radiators. And ironically, this one has the most bass of all that line of the Fortes. Because, this is well known throughout the community. Everybody knows that out of all the Fortes, the one had the deepest bass. And I don't know what the reasons are for it. Who knows? But, it just comes to show that, people look at this big 15-inch passive radio in the back and like, oh my God, the bass is going to be amazing, And I listen to some of these reviews and some of the things people say. They're like, yeah, well, you might need a sub, you may not. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me, man. Believe me, you do not need subs with these things. It is nuts how much this produces. And I'll never have to use subs again after listening to these things. And the sound stage is just huge. There's no box resonance. It sounds beautiful. I wouldn't even care how they measured. They sound so absolutely exquisite. The high end on the tweeters, the sweetness of the presentation is I just dropped my jaw. In fact, my wife, she's not even an audiophile. She goes, wow, she looks at me, she says, those sound nice. Those sound a lot better than your other ones. Honey, what are those? And And it's really funny when you get an unbiased opinion like that, because she's not into this stuff. She doesn't know. She's just going based on what she heard, And the other thing that's so amazing about it is the sensitivity. The tweeter on this has higher sensitivity apparently than the one that's used in the Heresy that I have. And this little 2.5 watt, 2.3 watt, 2 watt DEC amp just drives the living crap out of these things. It's incredible, man. It sounds like an orchestra in here. It's just crazy loud. It's so loud you wouldn't believe it. I'm gonna do a demo video just to show you guys. But in order to get my Heresy to sound the same way, I would have to use one of my solid state amps, my Dynaco 120 NG, which is a newer generation, which is an exquisite solid state amp. It's my favorite. And to get the Heresy and the subs and everything to sound, to get that big impact, I would have to plug that amp in there. Whereas with the Zen, with these speakers here, God, it does everything that the Heresy does and then some. So very little power to drive these. This weekend, I'm going to be hooking up the Allen Eatons, and I'm going to be, playing with those as well. I got some friends that are going to come over to hear them. They're very excited. But think about this for a second, okay? You can get these are mint. I'm not a sales guy for Klipsch restorations. I have nothing to do with them. I just really appreciated the fine craftsmanship. The finish is world class. It's professionally done. These guys know what they're doing. Why are you going to spend $3,500 on a pair of Heresy 4s? These will absolutely decimate them in every regard. I mean, there's nothing those things can do that these can't, and then some. Nothing. And you're going to pay a lot less. And I just think it's a much wiser choice. They don't take up any real estate compared to the Heresy 4, so there's no issue there. They're taller, but their sound just, you can play them at low volumes at night and you hear that deep bass in there, and it's just so beautiful, by comparison. So I hope this video has helped you out. I'm really happy to tell you that, I've been working with open baffle speakers. I love open baffles. I still do. And I just love these Forte ones. They're just such a perfect balance. They're going to have a deeper bass than what you get with the Cornwalls as well as the La Scalas. And I couldn't be more pleased. I was just so happy with the way they were packed. They were packed with wood to protect the, inside the cardboard, to protect them from any poles or anything penetrating the box. And so they were very well packed. And yeah, man. So if you guys have any thoughts or questions or comments or, things you want to share, I'll be happy to try and answer them. I try to answer whether it's criticism or not. You know, that's one of the differences. Even if I get criticized, I'll answer your question. And you know, some of the YouTubers I've been trying to, you know, make constructive comments, and a lot of them don't get answered. You know, which is unfortunate. So, all right, till next time.